At this time, I'd like to call the special Board of Finance meeting for January 14th to order. We could all please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Tom Sinkowitz, Don Cavella. Just want to make sure when I do your name that your audio is still working. All right.
Yeah. Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
Travis Irons.
Present. Good evening.
Okay, thank you. Ted Dumaine.
Yeah.
Gary Stalaboyne.
Yeah.
Matt Radin.
Here.
And Keith Shirley told me he might be in later. And then for those of you who might not have heard, Kim Medlin had submitted her letter of resignation last month, so we will, of course, not be expecting her, so that position is vacant as of now. So, Matt, I am elevating you for voting rights for this meeting, if you accept.
I accept.
Okay, very good. Next, item 3, acceptance of the minutes from the November 18th, 2020 meeting. They were distributed. I know I had a chance to review them a while back.
I move we accept them.
Comments? Okay, move to accept.
A second.
Okay, second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Ted
was that?
abstains.
Ted
Abstain.
abstains? Okay.
I wasn't there.
Yep. All right, motion carries. All right, next item under new business to discuss and accept the fiscal year 2020 audit report. So very happy that we're having this discussion and going over this in January as opposed to June. Certainly a far better timeline than this past year. But I personally want to thank, of course, Kelly and our auditor, Kyle, who is here tonight to present. Certainly, they have spent a lot of time putting this together. And of course, on our Board of Ed side, Ron Lucier, making sure that it got all done before December 31st, which it did. And Kyle, thank you again for your time in coming out this evening to present it to us.
Yep, happy to be here. Nice to see everybody again, albeit from a distance.
Hi,
Yep.
Kyle.
So as far as the presentation goes, it's a slideshow just like we had done last time. Kevin, do you have to give him administration rights so he can load that presentation?
He is now the host.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Let's see if this works. All right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, fantastic.
Yep.
Well, certainly thank you for having me on this evening. Nice to see everyone again. Again, we were faced with a pretty unique set of circumstances to complete the audit with everything happening around the world. But we did come on site for some limited testing, some things that we just couldn't do. I have Kathy wanting to join the meeting. Do you want me to hit admit?
Yes, please.
Okay. So really to get this done by the end of December took a lot of coordinating with Kelly and with Ron, a lot of communication back and forth, a lot of organization, but they both did a great job getting us what we needed. We were really never in a position where we were waiting on things for too long. So we're glad to be able to present this in January, but that's a big credit to your finance team, both at the town and at the Board of Ed. So I'm going to walk you through the 2020 audited financial statements. If you have any questions for me along the way, don't hesitate to speak up, and I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. But we'll start with the town's general fund, which saw an increase in total fund balance of about $365,000, leaving you with a total unassigned fund balance of $8.8 million. And that's actually while your total fund balance increased compared to the prior year, your unassigned fund balance decreased just a little bit. And that's in large part due to the money that was set aside for future education expenditures. And Kelly and I had spent quite a bit of time on the 2% of the school's budget. Whatever they didn't spend, they were able to carry forward for future use. So you'll see $658,000 set aside within the general fund that will be available for education expenditures in the future. And so if we just look at this graph real quick, you can see 2020 compared to 2019, your total fund balance is growing at a similar rate to prior years. But the blue graph, which represents your unassigned fund balance, is a little bit lower than what it was in the prior year. However, if you look at that unassigned fund balance and you compare that to your operating budget, it still represents a little bit over 18% of your total operating budget. And typically speaking, we would call anything between 8 and 16% a healthy target for that number to be at. So you're slightly above that range still. When we're looking at FY20, overall, your revenues were under budget by about $266,000, and that's a combination of a couple of things. Your property taxes were actually $340,000 above what you were anticipating. Your current year collection of your taxes was about 97.5%. Again, when we're looking at a healthy municipality, anything over 97% we'll typically consider to be a healthy collection rate. So you certainly met that.
Kyle, I think you're fading in and out a little bit with your audio.
Yeah, something covering your mic intermittently.
The other thing we can ask to do is, with no background static, anybody who's not talking, make sure you mute yourself, so that way that won't cause any disruption.
Sorry about that. When did I start to cut out? I can certainly go back as needed. Oh, I think you're on mute, Tom. Sorry.
I think at the tax collection portion, the 97% tax collection.
Okay, I'll make sure I'm nice and close to my microphone. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you.
So yeah, we would just consider anything over 97% to be a healthy collection rate on your assessed taxes. So certainly exceeded that target rate. But that was offset by about $558,000 of anticipated state aid that was budgeted for that didn't come in. Combination of a few different areas: adult ed, special ed, equalization, and I think that was in large part due to the COVID circumstances at the end of fiscal year 20. So overall, your revenue was just a little bit low, or was $266,000 lower than what you anticipated, and what you had budgeted. On the expenditure side of things, your expenditures were about almost $1.2 million lower than what you anticipated. Combination of a few things. Most prominently, your education was $659,000 lower than what was budgeted, with schools, basically being shut down effective in the middle of March. There was a lot of costs that you probably would have seen that just didn't happen. Same thing with employee benefits. We're seeing this across the board with all the municipalities that we're working with. Employee benefit costs have been much lower than anticipated during COVID. And same for capital outlay. A lot of projects that you had lined up just didn't happen because the world shut down for a little bit, and still seems to have. So quite a bit of savings in your expenditure line items. The WPCA Fund had operating revenues of just under $1.8 million, which is a slight decrease compared to the prior year of $1.84 million. Your operating expenses were also down just under $2 million compared to the prior year of $2.1 million. And when we look at 2020 compared to 2019, overall, the WPCA Fund had an operating loss of $205,000 in 2020, and which was lower than the previous year, which had an operating loss of $281,000. So overall, that fund has net position of just over $8 million, of which $749,000 can be used for operational, operational costs. Town has a couple of pension plans and a couple of OPEB plans. There's a private plan with that is just a town plan, and then there's also a plan with the state of Connecticut. The liability for the state of Connecticut plan is not maintained on your balance sheet because the state of Connecticut covers those costs. However, the town's private pension plan, that liability does go on your books. The total liability is $28.5 million. And at June 30, 2020, you had a little over $24 million worth of fiduciary net assets. So that plan was funded at 84.3%, which is a slight uptick from the prior year. So the funding percentage has grown. Overall, the town hasn't made the full required contribution that the actuary recommends. I think you funded maybe about 75% or so of that since 2014, which is the furthest back our data goes. But if you look back to 2014, you were funded at 82.5%. So while you haven't met the full contribution, your funded percentage has still continued to grow. The assumptions that your actuary is using with that plan are pretty reasonable, pretty up to date. Nothing too alarming to bring to your attention. Again, same with the OPEB plan. There's two plans, one with the state and one that is private for the town. That's funded at just under 7%, which is pretty consistent with the prior year. Total OPEB liability of $8.9 million. In 2020, there was a relatively low contribution compared to what the actuary would have required. I think the town contributed about 45% of that rate in the prior year, or 45% of that amount in the prior year versus about 1% in the current year. So I'm guessing that was a management decision. But your funding percentage stayed pretty much the same. When you look at an OPEB plan, and I know we talked about this last year, and you look at it and you say, well, it's only 7% funded. Most OPEB plans that we work with really aren't funded too highly yet because they just came on the books a couple of years ago and were kind of brought to the forefront, brought to everyone's attention. In the past, they were kind of just buried in the town's notes and, not really, there wasn't really a spotlight on them like there is now. I think that, if you looked at that 7%, you might consider it low. When you look at it in combination with where your pension plan is funded, and it's at a relatively healthy, stable rate of 84%, certainly makes things look a little bit better when you look at it together. We are going to end up issuing a finding in our compliance report. You haven't seen a compliance report yet because we haven't issued it. We were forced to wait until the Office of Management and Budget released their compliance requirements for all the CARES money that came in, some of which was received in your school lunch fund. Some CARES Act, I think it was about $177,000 or so. So we didn't get that information until I think it was Christmas Eve. We all got a nice Christmas present and got to read through federal compliance requirements. So we're in the process of testing that now. Generally, in that report is where you would see findings that we would write not only for compliance but also as it relates to the town's internal controls over financial reporting. And so we are going to have a finding very similar to what you saw in the prior year. Of course, we didn't issue the audit until June last year. So all of the recommendations that we made really could not be implemented during this audit. And I think the goal was to implement everything in fiscal year 2021. So, two of the main areas that we recommended improvements in were the timeliness of the reconciliation of cash from bank to book. I can tell you that we had no issues whatsoever this year with tying cash out when we came in to do the audit. So that appears to have been corrected in fiscal, towards the end of fiscal 20, heading into fiscal 21, which is great. We were still using Microsoft Excel as a financial reporting system for the schools, federal and state grants in this audit. I know that that's transitioned to an actual financial reporting system in 2021. So we haven't seen that yet. So, we're going to issue that same recommendation that it be moved from Excel to is it I think it's Munis or Tyler Technologies that you're using now, and so that will hopefully this is the last year that we have a similar comment, but because we did use Excel, we just had to include it anyways. But nothing new, which is great. Just the same exact issues that we talked about in the prior year. Nothing new to bring to your attention from an internal controls over financial reporting standpoint. I think all the adjustments that we need to make to the CFA and to the state CFA will be cleared up with all of the grants flowing through Ron's new system. As I noted before, we did select the child nutrition cluster, which is your school lunch program, for federal compliance testing. While we have not completed our testing, we don't have any compliance issues to bring to your attention at this point in time. That may change as we wrap up our single audit. And same for the state funds. We tested 3 this year: school readiness, your municipal grants, and your town road grants. I believe we've fully made it through the municipal and the town aid road grants without any compliance requirement or any non-compliance to bring to your attention. And we're wrapping up the school readiness this month. But hopefully we'll issue that full report by the end of this month. And that essentially sums up the 2020 audit. Hopefully you're able to hear all that. I apologize for my microphone having issues, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Questions, comments for Kyle?
Hi, Kyle. Thank you for joining us and putting together the presentation tonight. This is kind of a question of just general information, I guess. When it comes to a town's fund balance, and you pointed to a typical range of, I think it was 8 to 16%. Are there state or even any federal guidelines that restrict or set us up for penalty if we go too far to the upside of a percentage?
Not that I'm aware of. Generally speaking, those are those limits would be set by your bylaws. I've not heard of any penalties for having too high of fund balance. But if there may be a range that the Board of Finance sets that you prefer to fall under. Typically speaking, there's a minimum fund balance that you need to maintain, but I haven't seen anything on a maximum.
Okay, I guess the spirit of my question is more just out of interest. If there was a long-term pattern of an increasing fund balance, I was wondering if that would put us in any kind of questionable territory as far as review of any process or anything like that.
Yeah, the only again, I don't know of any state or federal guidelines on that. But as far as growing fund balance and raising taxes, that's certainly just something the Board of Finance, I'm sure, is always taking into consideration.
Yeah, Kelly, on that note, there was a couple of years ago, we increased our fund balance policy. What are we at now with that? It's at what percent?
I think it was 8 and now we're 10. I think it was 10. I think But I'll look at it to verify, but
Yeah.
I think we increased to 10. That was it.
Yeah, I remember we had
Yeah.
increased it, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a recommendation on how long the town should be able to run with that fund balance?
I think GFOA says what?
Okay. I was looking
Oh,
for Kyle.
yep.
Can you ask the question again? I apologize. I didn't quite.
Is there any recommendations that you guys look to see how long that town can run with that fund balance?
And we're not really able to make recommendations on what your fund balance level should be. We're more of reporting at what it is, but just, typically speaking, that range that we gave, anywhere between 8 and 16%, is what we would consider to be a healthy amount of fund balance.
Yeah. What do most of the municipalities that you do, where are they? Where are we in the system compared to them?
Probably on the higher end as far as compared to your total operating budget. But I wouldn't necessarily be envious of someone who had a lower amount either. Some of the municipalities that we work with certainly fall in that 3 to 5% range, which we would recommend as not being a healthy fund balance. So it really
We want to be more comfortable than uncomfortable. So
certainly right.
According to the Knowledge Bulletin today, Putnam was at 28 point something percent.
28 something?
28
Okay.
point something. I think somebody's being overtaxed.
Yeah, that or they're getting ready to send their own stimulus checks.
Good for you.
Yeah, I remember we had talked about it the last time. Again, it was a couple of years ago, and we increased the fund balance policy. And I remember we had talked about then kind of what other municipalities were at. And I remember researching some that were in like the 5 to 8 range, which I certainly didn't want to see us go, to that point. But then on the flip side, I saw ones that were at like 21, 22 or higher. And being realistic, I was like, yeah, I don't anticipate that we'll be getting to that percentage. But it seemed like we were trying to find kind of the halfway point of, maybe the 10 to 12% around there.
Yeah.
And
So
I
is
think
that-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that something, Tommy, is that something we should be looking at? Because with the 18% we're at now?
Well, we can certainly look at that again, because again, like I think it was 18 or 19 when we had last done it. So I mean, if we want to have that on a future meeting agenda to discuss the fund balance policy and kind of reassess it, I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
Hey, Teddy, you know how I feel about that, right?
Gary, I've heard it enough. That's why I put you on this board.
Kyle, you mentioned that there will have to be a finding reported on based on the Board of Ed's use of Excel as a financial statement tool. Of course, as we all know, they've since changed course, and for 21, they're using an actual reporting system. What impact does having that finding mean for us? What does that get received as at the state level?
Well, really what it does is it lowers your ability to be considered a low-risk auditee. So from my perspective, we've got to do more compliance testing every year to reach a certain threshold of your federal grants for testing. From a perspective of, how does that impact the town? Your credit agencies might be looking at your financial statements at your single audit, seeing that. Certainly maybe a third-party bank might, have, it may raise questions. This is a sort of situation where I don't think there would ever be a real significant impact on the town. It's not like we're saying that there are no layers of internal controls or that, there's misappropriation of assets or anything like that. This is more of a financial reporting issue. So I don't know that it will adversely affect the town, but I suppose it's a possibility.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Kelly. It's not like the school the school system started using Excel out of the blue. To my knowledge, they'd been using it for quite some time. Had this been raised on previous audits to any concern?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so. Before Infinite Vision, yeah.
Could this be the first time that it's actually being noted as a finding, or has this been notched against us in the past?
No, before it has.
It
Okay,
has been before.
thank you.
I recall reading it as a finding in your 2018 financial statements, which was the year before we took over as well.
So we've been consistent.
But again, and I think, you know, when we have a finding like that in the report, and every time there's a finding, there's an opportunity for the town or the Board of Ed to respond to that. And, you know, if someone were to read there's a finding and say, well, okay, well, what's the Board of Ed's response? Okay, they've already implemented a financial reporting system. You know, I think that certainly looks better.
Yeah, and it's also something that the Board of Finance needs to look closely at. You know, this one may not be too bad, and as we know, we're going in the right direction with the reporting, you know, going away from the Excel to the new reporting system. But I know, like, one example is in the past, the Board of Ed had like a 266,000 discrepancy. And so one of the requests of the Board of Finance that particular year was, you know, that wasn't something that was just going to slip by and like not be discussed. So we had discussed it in great length and decided we wanted a course of action, corrective action, to be presented from the Board of Ed to the Board of Finance, which they did. They gave us a document basically saying this is how we plan to, you know, reconcile and make sure that this doesn't happen again. So it's something that, you know, certainly when the board members are asking you, Kyle, you know, for any recommendations, you know, and then any findings, you know, it is something that we'll, you know, probably bring up again for discussion. And then if we see that we need to do more follow-up with the Board of Ed, we'll do that.
Yep, absolutely. We'll certainly let you know how things go in 2021 with the new system.
Before you go, Kyle, if you could turn me back into the host.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I know there's a way to do this. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So if there's no other questions or comments for Kyle, again, thank you for coming out virtually, I should say.
Yeah, hopefully we can do this next one in person.
Yeah, that would be
Yes.
nice.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Kyle. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kyle.
All right, Kevin, before we have any other discussion, was there anything you wanted to touch on in regards to the audit and the annual report?
I think it was good, and the steps are going forward. So I think that's all very good for the town of Plainfield. And I believe you gave a copy of the department reports to all of the members, so they had a chance to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
There's really, I mean, there's no need to go through all of it.
Right.
I do anticipate that if you accept the report, that what my next steps would be for the town is to, right after this meeting will be a meeting for the Board of Selectmen, just to set the date and time for our Zoom meeting for virtual, for the annual meeting for the view of the audit. And that was what I'll do next. We will also be looking to, Kelly's already worked on getting the books to be bound to present to the public. And at that point, we can put out that information for the financial statements and the town reports in that book. In the meantime, if it doesn't come in, it takes a few days or so. I can print off a few copies to leave in the town clerk's office for their availability. Also, we'll be putting up online both Kyle and the town report so they can access them like last year. And that will help out in case people can't get in. So I think we've put out as much information as possible. The Turnpike buyer will put the notice out there for the annual meeting. And I think, Tommy, you and I were going to talk about how we're going to put out a one-pager to help them out as well on the Turnpike buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've covered all the bases. We'll make sure we put it out there on the website, town Facebook page. Also remind people that via Nixle that there'll be a meeting. And I think we'll cover everything that way.
And then Kelly, can you just make sure that we have 8 of the printed copies put aside for the members of the board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yep.
every member will get a hard copy, which will be, you
Yep.
know, it'll be the combined, you know, just to be clear, it'll be the
Mhm.
narratives, but you'll also, of
Yes.
course, have the whole financial statements,
Audit. Yep.
all audit reflected in it. Yep.
Yep. I can do that.
Now, should we put that out to a town meeting before everything's all final? Because he mentioned they're still waiting for some stuff to come back in.
The what he's waiting on is the state single audit, which is just reviewing the grants, not the financial statement. The financial statement's all completed. It's
Okay.
your the grants, just verifying
Just
that
the grant money.
procedures. Yeah, it's
Okay.
about making sure the procedures were followed on the grant, the funding, and you're using the money for the grant. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the purpose of it.
Okay.
So would there be any objections to the members as far as Kevin just outlined, the plan would be if we approve the audit tonight, then he moves on to an immediate Board of Selectmen meeting to then set the town meeting for it. And then that's where the final step would be taken, assuming they get a quorum there and it gets approved there, then that's it. The annual town report's approved, the audit's approved, and we're done for this time around. Personally, I'm fine with the timeline, but certainly if there's any issues, any comments from the board members, now's the time to note them.
I'm
The Board of
good.
Selectmen would be setting the date, correct? That's not our function.
The Board of Selectmen, yeah.
I say go forward with it.
So, okay. Yeah, then if nobody has any objections, you know, as noted, you know, we've had some discussion, we had the presentation, so if everyone's comfortable, I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 audit report as presented.
Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, Gary, Don. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the fiscal year 2020 audit report as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, and that leads us into citizens participation. I can tell you that I had not had anybody reach out to me prior to the meeting in regards to this, and as we know, being a special meeting, it can only pertain to the audit. Can't be any other topics out of the blue. But I do see we have Mr. Peterson here. I don't know if he has anything. I'm guessing not. So if there's no citizen participation, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 7:04. Thank you, everyone.
And anybody interested, the select meeting's coming right up.